This is a talk with Monique Birault. So honored to have you here, and for folks to give you some context, Monique is a cuddler, an activist, artist, and architect, but also a compassionate, free thinker, as you're going to see very, very soon. Would you be open to sharing how you found Cuddle Sanctuary and how you found cuddling, and see where that takes our conversation?
Absolutely. I love sharing this because I always hope to share with people the joy and the benefits of cuddling. So the joy is kind of a funny word, but yeah, lots of benefits. So what brought me to Cuddle Sanctuary back in 2016, I had a very bad breakup. Mm-hmm. And I was very sad and hurt, and I saw a lot of input and support from different folks. And at a certain point in the process of healing from my breakup, I was like, oh, I just need to be held. I felt inside, I really need to be held. And I was saying to a friend who's a therapist, I was saying, God, I just really need that, but I don't want to navigate the territory of relationship. And what does it mean if you're holding somebody for an extended period of time? Mm-hmm. And so my friend says, oh, have you ever heard of cuddle parties? I'm like, what? No, never heard of that. And so I went online and I started searching, and Cuddle Sanctuary popped up.
As a local place, right?
That's right. And he even said, hey, try Meetup. It might be on Meetup or something. So I went through Meetup, that was, and so between the internet and Meetup, I found Cuddle Sanctuary. And then I went, finally. I was able to make time, and it was on Venice in Santa Monica, or Venice, whatever, there on the border. And I remember getting there and arriving, and I remember the room was very welcoming. Everybody looked really content, and it looked like a yoga room. Like you just walk into a room, and it was like tatami mats were on the floor, so that it had the feeling of a yoga room, familiar feeling. And so I proceeded to go in and sit down and chat. And one of the first people I talked to was our friend Mark, and I know it's an anonymous space, so I'm not going to mention any last names. And so, who was a very friendly and welcoming person. I was really nervous, surprisingly. I'm a hugger. I'm a big hugger in my life.
Right.
I'm touchy, but boy, was I nervous. And then you started to welcome us.
I was the leader, wasn't I?
Yes, you were.
I was there, your very first one.
Yes.
And tell me what you remember, because I have a memory. I'm not sure if it's right or not. You can tell me.
Okay, so it was wonderful. It was great. It was very welcoming. Everyone sat in a circle, and we shared like why we were there, and some people didn't want to share, so it was okay to pass. And you laid out the ground rules. No touching in the bikini area. It's platonic, and everyone had to agree, raise your hand. We all agreed, so it was really safe. It felt super safe. Women and men were in the group. It was multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-gender. It was super diverse group, which it was really great.
That's nice to hear.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And so then we started doing exercises on boundaries and saying no.
I think you liked that part especially.
I loved that part especially, you're right. Yeah. Because I learned that I really had difficulty with boundaries. Not only did I learn I had difficulties expressing the simplest of boundary, which is, do you want a hug, and just say no. Which a lot of, because we're taught, someone walks up with their arms open, oh, you have to give a hug, but here you don't have to. So that was great. And then I also learned that, later in the process of going through Cuddle Sanctuary, I also gained my voice in learning to ask for what I want. People would never guess that about me, because I come across very forceful, strong, independent, all those things. So no one would probably ever guess that sometimes I have difficulty asking for what I want or what I need.
Yeah.
But especially in the personal space, sometimes I do, or I did. So the other thing you did was you laid out the ground rules of the room, that there was a space to go if you didn't want to cuddle at all and just
That's
wanted
right.
to be in the room.
Yeah.
And then there was also a space to go if you didn't want to approach anyone, you were feeling shy, but you wanted someone to approach you, called the buddy bench, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember all that. Anyway, so we went through those exercises, and then the biggest thing for me was I remember asking you if it's okay to cry, because I remembered feeling emotional. And this took me quite by surprise.
Did you come up to me individually, like one-on-one, like, wait, before we keep going, is it okay to cry?
Yeah, I whispered, "Is it okay to cry?" Yeah, because I wasn't sure. And then and you were like, "Hey," and they said, "Yeah, it is." And you know, I think I forgot to mention that. So you turn and go, "Oh, I want to let everybody know in this space it's safe to laugh anytime you feel it and to cry." You know, and then you went over other things like that. So I felt really comfortable at that point. And then we had the exercises where you stand up, because this was all seated and we were pairing us off. Stand up and circulate freely and approach people with the same thing. Can I have a hug? And you just say no. But you have to say 3 no's, but you can also say yes.
Mhm.
And or 2 no's and yes, something like that. And that is when the river of Monique opened up. And I just froze in my position, sitting on the ground.
Mm.
I hugged my knees and I just started crying, and I kind of couldn't stop. And because I had so much stuff going on. And you sat down next to me and you said, "Can I sit next to you?" And I said, "Yes." And then you said, "Can I put my arm around you?" And I said, "Yes." And you did. And it was so soothing. It was incredibly soothing. When I stopped crying, then I was able to join the group and continue with the whole thing. And in the end, I felt just fantastic. It's like you say, like it's almost like you're, you know, out of this world state of being. And so then we dance around and we chill for a little while after, before we get in the car and drive. But that was huge for me, because I did not realize I had this trauma kind of whatever had gone on that I had to deal with. And in this wonderful way where, you know, different than therapy or something, I didn't have to explain myself. I could just be. And that's what I needed. I needed to just be. I needed to feel accepted. I needed to feel hugged. I needed to feel welcome. I just needed that at that time in my life, you know, where with my friends, I, you know, seemed fine, I'm sure. But in this space, this personal space, I had stuff to deal with. And I was able to do it.
Wow. Oh, wow. Your story moves me.
Me too. Okay, a little bit more.
I'm so honored to have intersected your life at that moment. And, you know, when I really appreciate what you said about without words, the being piece. And it reminds me of something you brought up was a really important information from Dr. Jill,
Yeah.
Jill, who did the stroke of insight. Will you talk about that?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So I enjoyed many months of Cuddle Sanctuary. It really was huge in me healing from the breakup, but also I learned I was healing from many things, many disappointments that my body was holding on to in life. And I've learned, and this is what I really appreciate, is sharing with people, and thanks for inviting me for here, because I want to share with people how important and how amazing touch is in healing. So the next step that happened in my life of Cuddle was you offered professional cuddling services, training, professional cuddling
right.
training.
That's right.
And so I knew you were offering it, and you know, and then and right around that time, I heard the interview with Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor on NPR, and they were interviewing her about her book called My Stroke of Insight.
And she did a TED Talk of the same title, My Stroke of Insight. And
Oh.
that's where I was introduced to her work.
Oh, awesome. I'm going to go back and listen to it.
It's
Just
good. It's so good.
That's so great.
Okay.
And so, you know, so she's a neuroanatomist, you know, Harvard trained and an instructor about the brain. She's a brain specialist. And what she talked about in her interview, many things, but I'll just cut to the chase on what mattered here, was one of the things she talked about after having a stroke and losing her executive function is she talked about how amazing it was that even though she couldn't read numbers, she couldn't really understand what people were saying to her. Words sounded like wah, 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 wah.
Wah, wah, wah. Mm-hmm.
What her body understood, what she was able to understand were people's feelings, how people felt about her when she was in the hospital, when the nurses would come in and, you know, who was just checking the boxes and who really cared. And then in this process, the nurses said, Gigi's coming, and she didn't know. This is how damaged.
She didn't know who Gigi was.
She didn't know who Gigi was. And she says, oh, a Gigi's coming. Wow, gosh, everyone looks excited about that. Boy, it's quite a to-do, the Gigi. Oh, what's a Gigi? You know, and then this woman comes in the room and gets in bed with her and wraps her arms around her and holds her. And she's like, oh, this is great. This is a Gigi. And she was really excited by it. And this woman was her mother. But her brain damage was such she was not able to recognize her mother. But being held, it was so healing for her. So, I mean, that's the takeaway I got from that interview. And I knew my mother was getting sick.
Yeah.
My mother is a strong-brained person. And
doctor, right? A PhD.
A PhD. Yes, a PhD, and very much in control of her life and control of many things. A controlling person, really. But you know, in our life as adults, we did not have an affectionate relationship. Really, we weren't physically. I mean, my mom went to France early in her life, and she got the French thing. A lot of French kisses, not a lot of hugs. You know.
Okay.
And but I just had this light bulb went off that if I could learn to hold my mother as she sinks into a stage of ailing where her brain function starts to leave her, I know she's going to be super anxious. So we don't have this history of touch. I want to figure out how I can hold her to provide soothing to her when that happens. So I'm going to go to the training, to the
You wanted to do it right.
Yeah, and I felt like if I could put on this hat, if I learned these techniques, and if I could learn how to do this in a professional manner and put on the hat of a professional cuddler, then I could navigate the territory of that parental divide, you know?
Wow.
So that's really what made me want to do the training. I went to the training, which was absolutely fabulous. People flew in from across the country. I don't even remember that group.
Yes, of course I do.
It was super amazing. And then at the end, we had practicum. Yeah. And there came another shift.
Is that okay? I want to share with the listeners and viewers of this what the practicum was. On the third day of this 3-day in-person course, the students were provided with a chance to work with clients, real clients that Cuddle Sanctuary vetted, and that they would have these mini sessions with actual clients. Take it away. Your experience.
And so we had these strangers come in as if they had found us like on the internet through our Cuddle Sanctuary website, you know, link up thing. And so we welcomed them with our all the things, the training that we have of how you welcome somebody in and interact and engage. And I mean, much like any other professional service, whether it be massage or therapy or anything like that, yeah. You know, there's a protocol. And so one of my clients was a blind lady. And at that moment, it just really hit me. And she actually was very adapted. She had a boyfriend. She had a lot going on. She was really hip and cool. But it really did occur to me, and it hit me, that there is an entire world of people with disabilities that probably don't get as much touch and that healing touch that many of us take for granted from friends and family, because people are often awkward in wanting to touch them, the people who are disabled.
Yeah, like folks who are quadriplegic or who receive a lot of helper care and they receive clinical touch, but not soothing, affectionate touch.
And especially touch where they don't have to be reciprocal. This is really important, even if they're in relationships, but and it's touch that they're in control of, right? And all of these things that we learn. And so when that happened, I just thought, oh my God, I'm going to get certified, because at some point I would love in particular to be able to offer cuddle services to that group. But I'm going to take a step back to my mom, because I want
Yeah,
to tell you how that played out really quickly,
Yeah.
because it was amazing. What happened was she died, a couple of years ago, but within 1 month, so her disease, she had cancer, her disease got bad, and she had a series of what are called mini strokes in the brain, TIAs, yeah. And so basically every 2 weeks, she was losing a skill, from not being able to walk, to not being able to remember what day it was, to not being able to feed herself, and to not being able to talk. I mean, she could say words, but not like we are saying smoothly. It was a lot of effort and stuttering, which she had never done before.
I've heard it's incredibly just infuriating for the person.
Absolutely, absolutely. And she was completely defeated, and her body hadn't completely given in yet. Just those 4 things were the things that fell away. And so she still wanted to do things, and we had a walker, but she really needed to be in the wheelchair. She tried to grab the walker and do things, and she couldn't express herself. So anyway, one day after coming back from the doctor, she just sat on the side of her bed, and she was just completely deflated and angry at the same time. And she just kept saying, sorry, sorry, sorry. It was really sad. So I thought, here's my chance. Put on my cuddle hat. So I sat down next to her on her bed, and I put my arm around her, and I had her put her head on my shoulder. And she did. And I had my arm around her. I could just feel her body go, hmm. And it really soothed her a lot. And it was really great. And right then I just felt like, this works. This really works. And then later when she was really bedridden, I climbed in bed with her, and I developed the new thing. I sent you a picture where, because of the cancer, her body is very sensitive. So I really laid on the perimeter of her body, but I put my arm around her head. I cradled her head, and I just had my arm around like that, and just laid next to her. And, it was soothing for her, and she was really happy. We healed, because parents and kids, so many things.
There's so much there between you.
Oh yeah, and we healed. I mean, at the beginning of me taking care of her, because I brought her home to take care of her, she's like, we've been through a lot of things. We've had a lot of conflicts. I'm like, yeah, well, we have. But, here we are. And, by the end, we were so healed. So healed. I would say the last 6 months of her life were perhaps the best period that we had together, of mutual love and acknowledgement. And I think, I'm not saying just because I held her, everything was cured. No, there's a lot of other work involved, but a lot of acknowledgement, but it was critical. It really helped.
There's so much that you said here. It's so touching. And thank you for being so generous and sharing such personal moments with me and with us.